Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends, thank you for the invitation to address this year's UK Media Freedom Forum. I regret that I could not be with you in person, but I am very pleased that my office is strongly represented. I commend the United Kingdom and all partners involved for sustaining momentum around the global media freedom agenda at a time when it is needed more than ever. Today, I would like to leave you with three key messages. First, the information ecosystem is now the arena where political power is shaped and contested. We are experiencing a structural shift, not simply in politics, but in the architecture of political life. Information flows are increasingly mediated by digital platforms, by large, powerful big tech platforms. Public debate is filtered and shaped, often distorted, by algorithms optimized by social media platforms for engagement rather than accuracy. We should never forget that social media platforms and big tech companies are first and foremost big business, and that controversy and engagement is good for business. Visibility is controlled by the social media platforms, and algorithmic amplification can propel fringe narratives into mainstream discourse within hours, if not minutes. Influence can be purchased, micro-targeted, automated, or weaponized at scale. We see this in increasing use of bots, often originating from outside Europe, targeting independent and critical media in Europe. The information ecosystem is no longer a backdrop to politics, it is the battleground of politics. In this environment, disinformation is not necessarily incidental noise. It is often strategic. It exploits emotional triggers, algorithmic incentives, and declining trust in institutions. Domestic and foreign actors alike understand that shaping perception is the first step to shaping policy. When the information ecosystem becomes distorted, the consequences are immediate. Polarization deepens, trust erodes. Democratic processes become vulnerable. Citizens struggle to distinguish fact from manipulation. It has often been pointed out that the purveyors of disinformation do not necessarily seek to gain precedence for their version of so-called truth, but rather to sow distrust among the public in any and all information, especially when information comes from traditionally accepted, reliable sources. The objective is to undermine societal trust, trust in serious media, trust in authorities, trust in democratic institutions. In the 2024 OECD survey on drivers of trust in public institutions, 44% of those surveyed had little or no trust in their national governments, while 39% stated some level of trust. Nor were results edifying in terms of trust and information integrity, where 39% stated that they had moderate to high trust in news media. In the UK, only 19% said they had high trust in the media, the lowest level among the 30 countries surveyed. And ladies and gentlemen, this is why we urgently need to address disinformation. But it is also why responses to disinformation must be principled and rooted in human rights. Inaction risks normalizing manipulation. Overreach risks suppressing legitimate speech and legitimate opinion. Our democracies will only continue to thrive when contradictory opinion can be expressed and discussed openly. The task before policymakers is thus to ensure human rights due diligence of algorithms, accountability of platforms, and resilience of citizens, without undermining freedom of expression. Second, independent journalism is not a luxury. It is a democratic infrastructure. In this environment, independent journalism is not optional. It is core societal infrastructure. Journalists verify, contextualize, investigate. They expose corruption. They scrutinize power. Of course, I refer here to journalists and newsrooms that adhere to journalistic codes of ethical reporting and self-regulatory mechanisms that govern their profession. Altogether, they create a shared factual foundation without which democratic societies cannot and will not function. But trust is the cornerstone. Trust in the integrity of information and in the integrity of our information spaces. And trust vitally depends on ethical journalism. Public service media play a crucial role in this picture. When they are genuinely independent, objective, and politically neutral, adequately funded, and editorially protected, they provide universal access to reliable, trustworthy information. They model journalism based on professional, ethical standards. Yet trust is fragile. It must be earned continuously through transparency, accountability, and ethical rigor. High-profile controversies, including those involving respected institutions such as the BBC, remind us that editorial misjudgment or ethical lapses can damage public confidence far beyond a single newsroom. Rebuilding trust requires openness, strong oversight, and a visible commitment to ethical standards, as we have indeed seen on the part of the BBC. The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is not to weaken public service media. It is to strengthen their independence, reinforce their accountability, and ensure that politicians and governments do not exploit moments of vulnerability to erode institutional and systemic safeguards. Yet at a time when the role of public service media in countering disinformation has become even more essential, pressure has intensified. However, in some countries, we see citizens standing up to protect the independence of public service media. Some weeks ago, thousands of Lithuanians went to the streets to protest against proposed government legislation that would weaken the independence of the public broadcaster LRT. They stood up to defend LRT. They stood up to defend the public service broadcaster. However, we do see growing hostility towards all media and widespread criticism of public service media in many countries. We see economic fragility hollowing out newsrooms, and we see online abuse that is coordinated and relentless, particularly targeting women journalists and minority voices. And increasingly, we see the strategic use of the law as a weapon. Strategic lawsuits against public participation, so-called SLAPPs, are designed not to win, but to weaken and intimidate. They drain resources, they send a message. Investigating power comes at a personal cost. The United Kingdom has taken important steps in recognizing this threat, including earlier legislative reforms. These efforts are welcome, but sustained momentum continues to be needed. Anti-SLAPP protections should not be exceptional, they should be standard, regardless of whether SLAPPs are domestic or of a cross-border nature. Effective anti-SLAPP frameworks require early dismissal mechanisms, cost-shifting provisions to deter abuse, clear definitions of public interest reporting, and, not the least, judicial training. Without robust safeguards, legal harassment will continue to chill investigative journalism. In the coming weeks, my office will publish guidance on countering SLAPPs, offering practical recommendations for lawmakers. We will also publish an analysis on foreign agents legislation and its impact on media freedom. Laws that label or stigmatize independent journalism under broad or vague criteria risk shrinking civic space and undermining pluralism. Safeguards do matter. Thirdly, the choices we make now determine whether regulation strengthens democracy or in fact weakens it. The questions before us are not whether regulation is needed. The question is how to design regulation that strengthens democratic resilience, not undermining it. Platform and artificial intelligence governance and support for sustainable journalism are all part of the equation. And so too is media literacy, equipping citizens to understand how algorithms shape what they see, how content is amplified, and how narratives can be manipulated. Ladies and gentlemen, media freedom is not an abstract value. It is a strategic asset for democratic countries. It enables evidence-based policymaking. It allows societies to withstand shocks, including disinformation campaigns designed to destabilize them. It has often been said that democracy requires an informed and engaged citizenry. We speak of participatory democracy. Our fellow citizens must have access to reliable information that ethical media can provide. At the same time, our societal discourse must encourage open and vibrant debate. Critical thinking and media literacy are fundamental. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the challenges before us are indeed significant, but so too is the collective capacity of those among us who are committed to safeguarding our democratic systems of government. That is a strength we must build on. Thank you.